we are on a mission to build brands that people want to hang out with. And we've had that mission for years now, and that's not changing.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Brand Builders Playbook. This is Jim Stengel.
I'm Ryan Barker.
And I'm Lindsey Waking.
I am so excited to be working with both of you in this series. Last week's episode was awesome with Chris Burgrave, but our topic this week is hard to beat: the business impact of brand love. And since we're speaking of brand building playbooks in late 2025, as we did last week, this will be our tradition. We will open each episode with a brief discussion of a brand's playbook that you are currently liking, hopefully related to the topic of the week, and this week is brand love. Last week, I talked about Chili's. Lindsey, what's your one for this week? A playbook on brand love that you're admiring?
I've really been loving Nutter Butter. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah,
of course.
They've been coming up really organically in a lot of interviews we've been doing around like Gen Z and different like brands that Gen Z, like people we've talked to, just really love. And I think they are doing a phenomenal job of like leveraging weird creativity. You know, I think it's like a 150-year-old brand, but they hadn't done advertising, and they may be not that old, but I think they haven't done advertising in like decades. And so they were kind of starting from scratch, trying to figure out how to win over a new, younger audience. And they really leaned into this idea of being like nutty. And then I think they found like the most, they really tapped into kind of an absurdist, surrealist sense of humor, like meme humor online, and have created, honestly, the weirdest content I've ever seen. Like it is like, but it's perfect. Like if you study internet absurdism, it's exactly, it's executed perfectly. And I think I was looking for attribution data before this to see, like it's performing really well on social, and it does seem to be like there are some bumps in sales. They've launched some new products too, so who knows if it's exactly from this move yet, but it seems to be hitting. And I just think it's such a brave way to stand out and to generate love. And I think we'll probably talk about this more, but I think in order to generate love, you have to take risks, right? Like there is no one who is deeply loved who isn't also hated or disliked in some way. And I think what they're doing was risky as hell, but it seems to be paying off.
Do you think they took a page out of the Skittles playbook? I
think so. Yeah. I think that's probably a good precursor.
And by the way, they're 55 years old. I just looked it up as you were speaking.
55. Okay.
Wow.
Still, they're not a teenager, right?
Yeah.
No.
So Ryan, what about your brand playbook of the week?
Well, one of the benefits of brand love is to have permission to expand to new adjacencies, new geographies, and new constituents. I woke up this morning, checked into the BERA database, and Spotify is a loved brand across multiple audiences, especially Gen Z, Zillennials, and Millennials. And it's not about just love for creating new features. They've expanded into audiobooks and podcasts. They've created tools that have empowered artists to do more of their content creation more. And then even more recently, their ad network has just recently expanded into Amazon. And so I love all of that comes across is innovating with purpose. And it's one of the key metrics that we're seeing that they're picking up. So very impressed with them.
I mean, the brand I think I would talk about this week on Brand Love and the Playbook actually is Starbucks. And I'm really interested to see how the story continues. Brian Niccol came in a year ago as the new CEO from the outside, from Yum Brands and from Chipotle and P&G. That's his background. I think he came in with the right philosophy, the right attitude, and the goal was to help people fall in love again with Starbucks after so many people, including myself, had walked away. I mean, it's a work in progress. It's not easy. He's a year into it. There's some hard work he's doing on stores and on overhead, and to build brand love when you're going through some structural changes, not easy. You just got to keep coming back to your fundamentals, why we're here, your purpose, which I think he's doing a good job of. So they're getting back into culture. You're seeing them a bit more that way. So I think it's a story that's still being written, and that's why I love seeing it. I think it is a playbook that they are writing as they go. and they're looking at the history and what's been special about the brand, but also what they're going to need to do in the future. So I'm loving watching that one. Okay, Ryan, last week we talked about why it's important to build a brand. So could you talk a bit about this concept of brand love,
Yeah,
brand equity? You've been in this space for a long time.
I have. It's interesting, especially when we deal with Wall Street. When folks first hear brand love, they tend to cringe. It sounds this soft vanity metric. But what we're really talking about is the emotional and rational connection that consumers have with brands. And we have the ability to prove that brand love is, in fact, an asset. I would say, to oversimplify from a Wall Street's perspective, three things that folks are looking for in understanding that brand love is sustainable is one is pricing power. Loved brands can reduce price sensitivity. The lifetime value of a consumer gets maximized. You can call that loyalty, but it's not just behavioral. It's emotional, and folks are willing to pay a premium. And then it's the ability to reduce the cost of acquisition. Love brands don't have to spend as much because they've already tickled the heartstrings of today's generation and tomorrow. So those aren't vanity metrics, and they can be measured in real time.
So Lindsey, that was a mouthful. It was very kind of hard data about brand love, pricing power, long-term value of a customer, market share growth. You talk about your company plunges into interesting topics and that are related to brand love. When you think about how you define and approach brand love, what do you talk about in your company when you work for clients who are trying to build their brand love?
Yeah, I mean, I think we think about I even hate the word irrational, because I don't think like the distinction between rational and irrational is a little bit of an outdated model. I think to begin with, that everything is emotional, and then we just, we justify it rationally. But, we really specialize in understanding what are the hidden emotional dynamics that drive our decisions and our behavior. And, I think about brand love, like, I do think about the ways in which we cherish or treasure or favor certain products, but I also think a lot about identity signals. And I think we're going to get into this later in the episode after our conversation about Coors, but brands represent something from us. It's not just that we love the product, it's also that we love what it stands for and really what it means about us. Like, if you are a Jeep person, what does that say about who you are? If you listen to Taylor Swift, or if you eat Nutella, like all these, not every brand has this dynamic, but especially we are in an era of like hyper identity where we are all trying to find signals in which to communicate and express all of the beautiful and crazy and weird and sophisticated nuances of who we are. And, we turn to things like diagnoses to do that. We turn to things like style to do that. We turn to things like hobbies to do that. We turn to things like brands to do that. And so when I think about love, I think sometimes in the branding world, we can be very like self-centered about it. Like, what is it about my product that people really love? But a lot of times it's, what is this product saying about you? What does it symbolize in the culture that people are picking up and using as like an identity signal, as a way to broadcast who they are? And I think that's kind of really, really interesting things I think are happening with brand love. And you hear it, like we were just working on Friskies, the cat food. One of our researchers was doing like a whole deep dive into like Friskies fanatics, because Friskies has some fanatical fans. It's interesting because it's also, a value brand. This fanaticism is so intense that people will literally like walk uphill while it's snowing across state lines to like get their cat's favorite food. Obviously, there are so many debates in our industry about what loyalty really looks like and how elastic or inelastic it is, but you can't deny, that there are moments where people will move heaven and hell in order to get the thing that they really want. And so I think that's like another dimension of how we think about it, both kind of identity and then, all the ways we will defy logic and sense in order to pursue something because it's either that good or that meaningful, or it represents something that meaningful.
It's interesting because you talk about how a lot of folks want to oversimplify that it's about the product. And it's interesting how quite often brand is put into the responsibility of a CMO when it's the most important asset for the whole organization. And I think that there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. And the difficulty is, how do you operationalize brand given that it can come to life, and love can come to life through the product, through the pricing, through distribution, through customer service, through messaging. All of those levers play a role in building brand.
Lindsey, I love what you said. I want to underscore something. When we talk about brand love, often in our industry, we tend to go to the premium brands that everyone likes to talk about: Netflix, Apple, et cetera, et cetera. I love what you said, about value brands. I mean, Aldi has an incredible customer following. Walmart has an incredible customer following. So it's just not a concept for premium. People just go out of their way and they love these brands. And those are just two examples, but there are many, many more. So this is a concept for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that point.
So Ryan, anything before we dismiss Lindsey to take a break with some of her Nutter Butters and maybe some coffee and listen to our discussion with Sofia? Anything you want to highlight for our audience to listen for?
I'm looking forward to hearing what Sofia has to say. I would say the concept of love, while it seems overly simplistic as a way of explaining, and the fact that this is a financial asset, it's important to speak the language to all stakeholders, whether you're talking to the board, to finance, to the consumer. Don't diminish the importance of it by just the label and the name.
That's brilliant. And, I'm really interested in how she thinks about how you stay relevant in terms of brand love over the course of like a long lifetime of a brand. Because there's such that push and pull of what makes, what's core in a brand, and then how culture is changing around it. And, so many iconic brands meant something at some point, and then the culture changes and that symbolism isn't there anymore. And you have to kind of I don't think you have to refine a purpose, but you have to refine how to express that purpose in a modern culture. And like alcohol is probably one of the best categories to really understand that dynamic. So that's what I'll be listening for.
Are you both in the category? Do you both drink beer, Ryan?
Oh, yes.
You do. Oh, yes.
Yes.
Lindsey?
I am newly sober, but I was a big beer drinker growing up. Well, growing up's a weird phrase. In my 20s.
Well, I'm sure Sofia will talk about the non-alc trend in the category, which I think is real and here for the long term. Okay, gang, we'll see you after the discussion, Lindsey and Ryan. Let's bring Sofia into this.
Let's do it.
Each week, we will bring on a special guest. And this week, I am super excited to bring on Sofia Colucci, CMO at Molson Coors, to talk about brand love. I can think of no one better. Welcome, Sofia.
Thanks for having me.
We have to start with, you have a new CEO. What will you say to this CEO to help you accelerate brand love at Molson Coors?
Yes, Rahul, our new CEO, I've worked closely with him in the past. He's a great guy, great leader, and we're really energized by his vision. And look, like he is really focused on driving results, and he has already been clear that he wants to put both the consumer and the customer at the forefront. And so, when we think about how marketing connects to that, our vision around building brands that people want to hang out with isn't going away, because we want to make sure that we're attracting people and building brand love for our brands. We're still very much focused on driving creatively effective marketing. I've talked about that framework with you before. So that is actually, we're going to double down on that, frankly, because for us to achieve the ambitions that Rahul wants us to deliver, it's going to be critical that every single thing we do in marketing, both at a national level and at a local level, is really based around building magnetic brands that people want to hang out with, that everything is focused, though, around driving results. And for results, it comes down to, obviously, brand health, and we'll talk about that, driving, which is then going to get into share, and then ultimately financial results. So both top line and bottom line growth. And so Rahul is familiar with the journey that we've been on. We've already been talking about, how we're going to continue to grow it and build it as we go on to the next chapter with Molson Coors.
Okay, Sofia, you've been at Molson Coors over 5 years, and before that, you were with PepsiCo working on Quaker Oats for some time. Was there an experience you can share with Ryan and myself where this concept of building brand love really took root with you?
Sure. And look, I've been working now in consumer packaged goods for over 20 years. So PepsiCo before this, a company called Maple Leaf Foods in Canada before. But I actually think that the concept of building brand love started even before my career. It actually started in one of my first part-time jobs, and that was at a Canadian drugstore called Shoppers Drug Mart. So very similar to like a Walgreens. I would say that because Canada doesn't have the same department store type feeling like, Target's. Like their cosmetics department was quite big. And I used to work in cosmetics as a part-time job. So I was like a 15, 16-year-old girl selling cosmetics, low end and high end cosmetics to people that came in. And I learned so much stocking the shelves, talking to consumers, and really observing how people were thinking about what they were purchasing and really what was going into the building of the brands. And so a great example is I would actually, start to realize like why was a woman picking up a L'Oreal hair color instead of Revlon? And I would actually start to look at, what was their packaging like? What was, who were they choosing for their models? What was the advertising that I was then seeing on television? And I started to really think about all those connections and think about like this, like sense that women were just, and some men too, of course, reaching for a particular brand based on all of these different levers that the actual brand was pulling. So, it made me really interested in marketing and how brands build, consumer affinity, even before I got into university or even into a company where I worked in marketing.
I love that. How would you explain to our listeners what brand love is and the difference compared to just simple recognition?
Yeah, I mean, I think like everyone has different ways to describe it. And so what I'm going to say probably is not, rocket science for anyone, but brand love really drives like emotional connection and loyalty. It sets us apart from a sea of sameness and makes people proud to hold in their hands. And so again, if you think about what we're trying to do at Molson Coors, especially if you think about the beer category, nothing is more important than that badge value, that brand that you hold in your hand. So we are on a mission to build brands that people want to hang out with. And we've had that mission for years now, and that's not changing. And so I think that's the biggest one because, in a category like this, like it's very different than, other categories where maybe people are consuming them more at home or in private. Like in a brand, in a category like beer or alcohol, like that's where really driving that brand love and that connection is so important.
Sophia, your category has been famous over the decades for emotional advertising as a way to build brand love. And obviously, the world has changed, and there's so many more ways to do that. How do you think the way you build brand love has shifted in your category, your core category, and the related ones that you work in as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is like if you look at the core tenets of building brand love, like it still comes down to really understanding who your consumer is and what your brand stands for and the role that they play in the consumer's lives. And so if you think we're in 2025, like I don't think that necessarily has changed per se versus where, consumers were 20 or 30 years ago. Now, I do think though the choices that consumers have really changed and the way we can connect with consumers has really changed. So obviously, I'm sure you talk about this a lot with other people on your podcast, like traditional ways of reaching consumers, while still important, they're evolving. And so we need to think about not just, linear television, which by the way, like connecting with consumers while they're watching live sports and beer is still super, super important. But at the same time, like how do we think about partnering with the right creators, influencers, making sure that our brands are showing up in the right places? So I think, going back to it, the core principles of building brand love, knowing who your consumer is, being true to what your brand is all about, those stay the same. It's more about the how, and then also continuing to think about understanding who you're competing against and knowing that that's going to continue to evolve.
You talk about the emotional connection and then your peers that you're competing with. Some of our listeners don't have the luxury of having a superior product, or they might even be at pricing parity. Do you believe that the emotional connection can be leveraged in a way if you are at parity in both product and price to win?
Absolutely. And I think, like the reality is like there's so many different reasons consumers are reaching for brands. And we have a variety of brands in our portfolio and they come at different price points. And, we have different levers that we can work with. We can obviously think about like advertising to consumers to reach to them through traditional means, like again, like being in live sports or partnerships with celebrities. And of course, we can also work on pricing. But the reality is, like, we are not necessarily seeing that just by focusing on pricing, like that's what's going to drive that long-term brand love. And so if you think about it, like we have brands within our portfolio. Peroni is a great example that actually plays in the above premium segment of beer. So, it is a higher priced beer option for consumers. And it's growing double digits. And we know that like people love the brand. They love what it stands for. It's bringing style to the world of beer. It's the type of beer and brand that people can hold in their hands and be proud of. And it is competing against other beverage options that might be less expensive, but there is a different reason consumers are reaching for it.
Sophia, you talked about Peroni. I mean, you've worked on so many brands that are loved, and we talked about
Yes.
your early career experience in that. Is there one in your portfolio now that you would highlight as you think has been exemplary in building, its affinity with consumers, brand love, if you will? Is there one you would draw out and why?
Yeah, I can probably give an example from the US and even Canada, depending on time. So I would start with the US and it's Coors Banquet. So look, we definitely have industry headwinds in the beer category, but we're still seeing so much brand love, and in particular for Coors Banquet. And what we've really been leaning into is what makes this brand so distinct and really authentically what it has been stood for the last 150 years. It's grown the last 5 consecutive years and 16 straight quarters of share growth. And so, like I mentioned, it's 150 years old, but what consumers love about it, it's authenticity, and it's loved by core drinkers who've been, reaching for this brand for decades. But what's really interesting now is that we're seeing so much love and connection with younger legal age drinking consumers. So it's actually one of the fastest growing beer brands with legal age drinking Gen Z drinkers. And I'm going to botch it because I want to just say Gen Z drinkers, but it's the
You
ones
got
that
it.
are legal age, the legal
Yes.
age. It's one of the fastest growing beers with this audience. And, the brand love is so strong that they're proud to wear banquet merch. If you actually go to, festivals like Lollapalooza, which by the way, we don't actually sponsor, I saw more Coors Banquet t-shirts than any other brand out there. And we actually did. We worked with our insights team to say, hey, is there a correlation? And in fact, people who actually wear Coors Banquet, merch are 5 times more likely to want to drink and buy Coors Banquet. And so this is just this irrational love. And I do think like what we've done is we've really leaned into the authenticity, that Western culture, that grit that Coors Banquet has held. It's the essence of Coors Banquet, and it's been there for 150 years. Now, we are in a point in our culture where, country culture is pop culture, and it's cool. And so this is a really special time for Coors Banquet, but we think we have so much momentum and potential. So the team has been really deliberate with that brand.
Sophia, it's really interesting. 150-year-old, I think it's one of the most difficult challenges for brand builders. You have a core audience that's grown up with the brand, and then yet you brought
Yeah.
a younger generation in. How do you do that? It's very difficult. You can't be all things to all people.
Totally. And I think I think the team has been really smart around the different things that we're trying to do. I think what comes down to it is first and foremost, like honoring and being really focused on the essence of the brand. And so ensuring that everything we do stays true to doing things even when they're hard. Our long-term platform is Start Your Legacy that we've continued with Coors Banquet. And then as we think about connecting with consumers, both our core drinkers who've loved us for years, along with these new drinkers, it's how do we bring that authenticity, maintain what's integral about Coors Banquet, but reach consumers in different ways. So here's some examples. So, yes, we have a platform around Start Your Legacy. We have like really, really impactful film that we put out there that we put paid media around. But at the same time, we also have partnerships. So we've been on Yellowstone for a number of years now. And that's been a really big piece of driving Coors Banquet and culture because it's obviously connected with a new generation and an audience that are fans of Yellowstone. Another thing that we've started in the last couple of years is a partnership with Wrangler. Wrangler is a brand that is, there's so much affinity with that brand and Coors Banquet. And last year we launched the first ever beer wash jeans with Coors Banquet. This year we launched a new set of merch, like 20 different clothing pieces with Wrangler and Coors Banquet. And we've done them in really creative ways. So I think the key in all of this is continuing to stay true on what your brand is all about. And then, focus on that long-term platform, but then find different ways to reach your consumers that's still connected to the essence and the long-term platform of your brand.
Ryan, you live in the West. Are you a banquet drinker?
I am, but
Well, I would hope so.
absolutely across the portfolio. Absolutely. What's interesting is with the legalization of marijuana in many places, that poses challenges to beer drinkers. How do you sustain love with trends that are attacking outside the category?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And we're constantly looking at what are the other choices consumers have? What are those macro forces that are out there? And I think the biggest thing is to understand like what are the drivers and the reasons that consumers are reaching for some of those other options. And so for instance, like if you look at something like cannabis, obviously, yes, there's like emotional benefits that they're getting out of it, but in some cases too, consumers are looking for choices beyond alcohol and they are interested in non-alcoholic options. And so that's another reason as we think about our portfolio, we are diversifying our portfolio. We've traditionally been, 5 years ago, we were more of a beer centric portfolio. We've evolved. We are now a total beverage company. And in doing that, we've actually started to push not just into things in alcohol beyond beer, but we've also started to push into non-alc versions of some of our, most popular beers. So we have a Blue Moon NA, which is actually a really fast growing non-alcoholic beer. We have a Peroni 00. And we just announced this year, we have a new partnership with Fever Tree, which is one of the most, if you haven't tried it, it's delicious. It's a very premium mixer and it's fantastic. And so that's another example of us diversifying our portfolio to, meet consumers where they are and where they're going, and maybe not necessarily have the same options to your point around cannabis, but at least what are those options fulfilling and how do we think about diversifying our portfolio and getting into spaces that deliver on those needs?
By the way, the Peroni Zero and the Blue Moon are wonderful products. There is absolutely no
Thank you.
trade-off. I've had them both in the last month, and I haven't had Blue Moon in a while, and I saw you had an NA, so I tried it. It was a really hot day. It was midday, and I had it with some tacos. Delicious. So well
That's
done.
to our ears. It's our R&D teams and our innovation teams. And actually on that note, Jim, they worked really hard. We know from an NA beer perspective, like obviously like table stakes are NA, let's be clear, but people delivering on something delicious is so important because otherwise like, why are you drinking it? And so that was one of the key things that we were trying to do with that product. So I'll let the team know. Thank you.
No, it's a great job. So Ryan, back to you. Do you want to talk about metrics?
Yeah.
At this point,
So,
or, we've been talking 10 or 15 minutes.
Yes.
We haven't gotten to metrics. What's
Let's
wrong,
do it.
Brian? Are you sleepy?
I'm loving the stories. So Sophia, if whether someone's new starting out in brand building or seasoned, how do you measure brand love, regardless of sectors and categories, to help folks have that conversation with other stakeholders who might not be fluent in brand?
Absolutely. And as you can imagine, there is no shortage of different metrics that we look at. And it's a combination of both short-term and long-term metrics. So I'll touch on some of the short-term ones, but then the long-term ones I think will be interesting to you. So I think from a short-term perspective, like obviously there's things that you would imagine that we're looking at, like household penetration, buy rate, competitive interaction. We're also looking at signals on how our brands perform in social, as a lot of the things that we do are driving our brands and culture. So, I think over the years, we were probably more focused on quantity of impressions, and now we're really focused on quality. So a great example was last year, we announced a partnership with the PWHL, so the Professional Women's Hockey League, with Molson Canadian. We created jerseys like where we basically move the players' names to the bottom of their jerseys so it wouldn't be covered by their hair. And like this simple shift drove so much social conversation and shares, so much so that even tennis legend Billie Jean King, she shared it on her Instagram. So that to us is like a key signal and quality around brand love. But we place equal, if not greater, emphasis on long term indicators, which are really critical to building enduring brands. And that's where BERA comes in. So we actually started working with BERA, with our insights team, brought them in 2 years ago. And with BERA, we focus on two key metrics. And so we look at brand equity score as well as consideration. And we've actually done work with our insights and partners in our analytics team to validate that these metrics, they actually correlate back to sales performance. And so our findings show that while both are really essential to growth, consideration tends to be more predictive of emerging brands. So like, for instance, like a Topo Chico hard seltzer in our portfolio. But brand equity, it plays a stronger role in driving growth of those established brands, say like a Coors Light. So we really believe that, as we think about brand health and measuring brand love, it's not just a one size fits all approach. We've been really deliberate and thoughtful as to how we look at both. And so going back to the question, as we bring in new marketers, we actually have a cadence and a rigor as to how we look at both of those short-term indicators, some signals, as well as consistent tracking of the long-term in brand health through BERA.
So measuring for today and tomorrow. It's interesting, the history of the portfolio and proliferation of media, the job gets challenging by the day, and now we have AI in the mix. So curious on how do you build brand love in a world of AI now? Is that a fad? Is that something staying?
I think it's the reality is, and I'm sure this question comes up all the time. Like, I don't think it's a fad. I think it's staying. I also think, there's so many industry experts that have talked and, have been really eloquent in the way that they've spoken to it. I think you probably both saw it or heard of it. I remember at Con, one of the leaders from Apple talked about the role of AI and thinking about the role of AI in creativity, and not just like, and then not taking over the driver's seat, but actually being shotgun with you. And like, so I think, as a marketer, that's how we think about it too. We value creativity so much. Humans are still going to be leading the charge, but we have to think about, what are smart ways that we can incorporate AI to make our work stronger and make our people, more impactful and effective with the work that they do. And so we are exploring different ways in, we have obviously company-wide things that we're doing. We're also looking specifically from a marketing and creativity side of things. We're always being really thoughtful, though, that humans come first in this and that we're really driving it.
I have one final question, Sophia, then I'll let Ryan end the segment with you, which has been wonderful, by the way. This is the Brand Builders Playbook, right? And we're in episode 2. So we're trying to help people build their own playbook to build their brands. So if we opened up your playbook for building a brand that is loved, what would be the top 3 things in Sophia's playbook to build a brand that is loved based on all of your wonderful experience?
For sure. So I think, to really make it as tight as possible, the first one is understanding your consumers, just not just who they are, like where they live and what they're into, but really why they love your brand. The second one is understanding that brand and being ruthlessly consistent with it. So it's just like the relationships you have in your life. You don't want friends that are inconsistent. Like, you want to know what your brand stand for, and you want to make sure that it is consistent year over year. Brands are no different. And then I think the third thing is creating the work that makes you feel something. And so we've talked about this before, but this has been so important for us. If you think of our creative framework, the first one, muscle, the first one is magnetic. It's building work that makes people feel something. It can make you laugh, cry, give you goosebumps, but it's so important in everything we do, especially though with work designed to build brand love. Like, we want our consumers to have that emotional connection with our brands that really moves towards advocacy for our brands. So those would be the 3 things that I would say.
By the way, the muscle framework we won't talk about in great detail, but you do have a framework, a way that you at
Yes.
Molson Coors think about building brands, and muscle is
Yes.
your acronym. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that's a good one. I think that's an important point to make. Companies, I think, that are able to scale their thinking and their philosophy tend to do better in building brands that are loved.
Absolutely.
We've been very ruthless about it, but it's really catching on, so we're happy about it.
I want to thank you, Sophia. I love how the origin this started when you were 15 years old selling makeup, and that curiosity became refined over the years. And you've
Yeah.
had tremendous success. Looking forward to seeing the great magic you continue to endure. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Great to see you, Sophia. Okay, Lindsey, we're welcoming you back to the discussion. And I should have brought this up earlier in the show. I've known you for a couple years now, and I've always known you for your brand identity is your long hair. And you've cut it. And I just have to reflect a little bit on the discussion we just had with Sophia. You didn't cut it so your hockey jersey would show your number, right?
I did not, although I kind of wish I did. I know I never thought I'd cut, like, my long hair was like one thing sacred. Like, it felt like the one sacred thing that I would never change. And when I moved out of New York, I was just in this, like, I have this philosophy: if you're going to change one thing, you might as well change everything, because the momentum of change, I think, helps change happen throughout your whole life. And so I was like, fuck it, we're gonna cut off. We're gonna do the one thing I said I'd never do, and cut it all off. I did. And when I went to go get my haircut, the woman was like, I just need to make sure, are you going through like a breakup? Like,
please sign here.
I need to know if you're going to cry during this experience.
I mean, I've seen it now for about 15 minutes. I like it.
Thank you.
I like it. Yeah. So anyway, but that's a big move. All right. Now back to Sophia. That was a great discussion, by the way. Just loved it. She's so good. What stood out for you, Lindsey, from that discussion? I mean, before we went into it, you said you were curious about how they think about older brands and brands over a long period. She certainly went there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I remember I wrote down something she said that, nothing is more important than badge value and beer. In a category with alcohol where it's public consumption, brand love is so important. And I think what was brilliant about what she was getting at is not just brand love, but she was very tuned into how these brands are identity signals for us and how they're signaling you're a certain type of person. And, like we were kind of beginning to touch on at the beginning, like, alcohol is so much a part of our identity. Like, I don't know about you guys, like, when I was like just of drinking age, I started drinking Old Crow whiskey because I really wanted to be a cool whiskey girl, and not like a top shelf whiskey girl. I wanted to be like a dive bar whiskey girl. And like Old Crow was like king of, like, you're like a tortured poet of like a dive bar queen. But and I actually forced myself to learn to like the product because it symbolized something that I believed in. And I think she was really hitting on that Coors is that to people. And even the fact that it's on t-shirts and showing up at festivals, like, it seems to be kind of part of this identity signal constellation that Carhartt and Levi's and Ford that are signaling, kind of an American frontiers myth or a working class kind of core cowboy culture. Like, all these things are kind of coming back into vogue, and Coors is so perfectly set up to symbolize those things within kind of the American psyche. And she's very aware of that and using it seemingly really smartly.
I liked that she talked about the authenticity required to stay to the core of the brand, but at the same time, focusing on tomorrow's generation while preserving today's generation in an authentic way. And that might be two different executions. It dawned on me that to be a successful CMO, not only did she talk about short-term and long-term financial measurement, but it all began when she was 15 and 16 selling makeup. And there's just this general curiosity. If you're not a curious individual, it's probably not the right job for you from a sustainable package, because there's so many components and complexities of the emotional connection that you have to harness. So she's clearly been very successful.
I also loved her opening statements about her CEO. And clearly they have a strong relationship. They see the role of brands in their company, the role of brand love in a similar way. So I think that's going to be interesting to watch then, this next chapter of Molson Coors, because I think that the team seems set up for success. They share the same values, the same philosophy in building a brand.
Not every one of our listeners has already leadership's buy-in. So I think that does set it up for success, Jim.
Jim, I'm curious how you interpret she had kind of said their thrust is creating magnetic brands that people want to hang out with.
Yeah, it's really good. Really good. And it's very, very powerful language and very, very powerful message to the organization. The rest of that framework is we had her on my other show, the CMO podcast, and she talked in detail about that framework muscle. And it's been a major priority of the company to roll that out around the world. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute when we close the show. But I think that was, it's had a profound impact. So we're only in our second show of the season, but we do have this tradition of opening up with a playbook we admire, and we have a new tradition where we're going to close each show with one thing you would like our audience to consider adding to their brand building playbook from the topic of the week. So Ryan, why don't we start with you? What would you recommend our audience consider to add to their playbook on brand love?
Absolutely. I think it's too easy for folks to say that brand's all about tomorrow. It's only about long term. We heard clearly today, Sofia started about the short term and long term contribution. If you don't nail the short and the long together, you might not be around long enough in order to justify your contribution to the bottom line. So I would say, when instilling brand love into the organization, make sure you think about today and tomorrow simultaneously.
Lindsey, I want you to be the last word, so I'll go in with mine for this week because I want you to have the last word on brand love. On this one, I'm going to go back to the framework. What I recommend you add is if you're the CMO or anyone senior in a company, is there a common philosophy / framework / point of view on how you build a brand that is loved and admired and is magnetic? And if you don't, you'll kind of be all over the place. Hard to build a culture if you don't have something like that. So I would recommend you put into your playbook, where are we in terms of having a shared framework or point of view? And if you have a strong one, like companies like Molson Coors, P&G, don't sit on it. It does change, and you do need to renew it, and you need to update it. So that's what I would add. So Lindsey, to you, last word.
I think if you deal in realms of strategy or research or creative, I think paying attention to how Coors not only understands their heritage, but then has found a true understanding of where the culture is going and what people are hungering for in terms of identity, and finding a way to kind of reinvent themselves to fit that mythology. I often think about, there are these myths in culture, right? There are these stories, almost archetypes, like the working class man, or the starlet, or the American frontiers myth. There are these symbols in all cultures, but the same is true within American culture, and we're often using our brands to almost be these little shortcuts to tell us, I'm this kind of person. And I think in order to really find that formula, you have to understand, what did your brand ever symbolize, if anything, and then where does that line up with the cultural symbols that are really hitting right now. And I think Coors does such a beautiful job of being able to kind of slot themselves into this modern hunger for these more, working class, frontiers, cowboys sort of myths, in a way that generates a kind of love where you wear a Coors shirt at a festival and it says something about who you are, even if you're not drinking the beer. And so I think that's powerful. And once you have that framework, then you can do really fun things with it. Like the beer washed jeans, I thought was a brilliant,
I love that.
and it's fun, I think sometimes we're so serious about marketing, we forget that once you have that strategy like they do, being able to have fun with it is, I think, the best way to generate love from people.
Okay, you're not going to have the last word. Judy Stevens, our producer, joined the show. She's worked at Marvel for years. She has a couple books out. She knows a lot about brand love. She's a whiskey girl, right? When you say you're a whiskey girl?
I'm a Scotch girl, yes.
So what's your Scotch brand that you love, and what's it say about you?
Bricolotti. I'm a Bricolotti fangirl. The iconic teal blue bottle that you will see in many bars and whiskey stores. They just have a very peaty, smoky whiskey that I very much enjoy. And I just generally love the branding. I love what they do for their fans and their bottle releases and all that stuff. But I think once you find one Scotch you love, you discover all these incredible brands that you discover from there. Like, for example, Nick Nean, which is a small independent distillery that's predominantly female run, I discovered thanks to learning about Scotch.
And when you wear T-shirts to the many festivals you go to every year, Judy, what's the T-shirt you usually sport?
Jim loves to make fun of my Formula One fandom, so yes, I love Formula One, so that's one of my side fandoms. I think we all have a lot of fandoms, don't we?
Absolutely.
We do. Yeah, that's why this is a great episode. And we could do a whole nother show on our fandoms. Maybe we should.
Yeah.
We were talking before we started about my glasses. I'm very known for my round glasses. I mean, it's a brand that I just love, right? I'm a big fan of LGR. They were a small Italian brand. I learned about them in France at the Cannes Festival when my glasses broke. I've been loyal to them for like 15 years. And I just saw that they're now they did all the glasses for the White Lotus season 3. So there you go, throwing themselves into culture. I don't buy any other brand.
That's love. That's love.
So how about you, Ryan, before we sign off? What's your fandom these days?
We're all talking about alcohol. I'm getting thirsty. So no shortage of sectors here. I think for me right now, because of the whole AI component, I am a fan of some of these new toys. So playing with ChatGPT, it's just transformed both my personal and business life tremendously. So I'm a fanboy of AI.
Lindsey, last word.
Oh, I feel like my fandom right now doesn't fit this formula really well because I'm just like deep into like esoteric mysticism right now.
Okay.
Old Sufi mystics are my fandom right now.
I'm not familiar with Sufi mystics. What are Sufi mystics?
Google it, Ryan. Go to ChatGPT.
The season, it's Halloween. It's perfect timing too.
Yeah, it is perfect timing.
It is. Like the Florence and the Machine album that's about to drop, I think is gonna play into this. She's really delivering like a coven culture anthem this season.
I need to dive in.
Well, this show went to good places. So everyone, we'll be back next week with part 3 of the Brand Builders Podcast. This has been a great show. Thanks, Ryan, Lindsey, and Judy. Pricing is the topic next week, which is very, very related to brand love, of course. And we'll get into that in great depth next week. So great show. Thanks all. See you next week.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.